good afternoon. Oh, good morning, people. God, what is good afternoon? Anyway, good morning, welcome, and don't forget if you got any questions or answers, this time we will be taking a Q&A. So get your questions in, people. Okay. Hello. Good morning, Lee. How are you?
I am absolutely fabulous, sir. Yourself?
Fine, thanks. The last time we talked, we were talking about your mum being an alcoholic and that you've been going through all the struggles with that and everything. I want to kind of like carry on from that if I could,
Yeah,
because
feel free.
what was it like? What was it like, kind of like when you were in your teenage years, kind of like knowing that your mum was an alcoholic and that you might be an alcoholic too someday if you kind of, if you, well, you might be an alcoholic, won't you?
Well, that is a very, very good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that one, to be fair. What actually happened was my mother was an absolute nightmare through my teenage years. I was just basically the scapegoat for anything that ever went wrong in her life. And my father just wouldn't actually confront her on anything. So the more she became drunk, the more I could see the actual consequences of what the drink was doing to her, because she seemed to have these mood swings when she drank. Now, that's not to say that I went completely teetotal and didn't drink at all, because what happened was I think I left the house when I was 16, 17. I literally didn't speak to him for 5 years, but because my mental thinking wasn't straight, I then lived my teenage years in my 20s and 30s. Every single night I was out partying, I was in clubs, I was drinking, I was surviving on 4 hours sleep, I was doing everything untoward. And then one day I woke up and suddenly realized, hang on a minute, what am I doing? I'm going down the same route as my mother. I'm drinking at lunchtimes, I'm going out after work, I'm drinking at the weekends. And suddenly that realization hit me to the point whereby it's like, hang on, I've got to stop this. And within the space of, I would say, about 3 weeks, I stopped, literally stopped, and thought, I've now turned into my mother. And I wasn't particularly, I wouldn't say a nice person is the wrong word, but I was heading down that route as to where she was. So I had that realization moment of, hang on, I'm going to stop this and just cut it out completely. That's not to say that I don't go out with the boys occasionally and go and get drunk, but it's very rare that I actually do that now. It's about once in every 6 months, or when I'm on holiday, I have a few pints. But other than that, don't touch it at all.
Yeah, yeah. And also, what was it like about the farm, around the family and everything? But that put some pressure on the family, did it?
Well, it's really odd because my family is quite a large family, and on my father's side, it's very Victorian background. On my mother's side, it's very working class. The working class side of the family knew that she had a problem,
But
and
they
yet
covered
tried
it
to,
up probably, did they?
yeah, they tried to cover it up
Yeah.
completely. My Victorian side of my family just cut all ties completely with my parents, and it was very, very strange because it's all in my book, by the way. Just plugging that. and and basically, what happened was, um, at the funeral, it because I wasn't prepared to let my mother get away with what she put everyone through for all the years. I actually read this speech out that was quite controversial about she had a problem throughout her life. And unfortunately, drink took over everything. And I read out this nice sort of thing about the family should have actually stood by her and got her through it. The family should have done this. The family should have done that. And what actually happened was the whole family just was silent throughout the whole service. And suddenly, as we have been led out, my uncle grabbed me in the doorway and tried to punch me in the face in front of my mother's coffin, and all hell erupted in the church. And that shows you how deep rooted the actual problem is with regards to covering up somebody that's a drunk in the family, rather than confront it and say, look, we know you got a problem, let's go and get it sorted, here's some help, and we'll get you through it, we'll support you. But they rather just sort of make excuses for her behavior, make excuses for everything and cover it up. And I don't understand that, particularly with all the help and assistance around these days. If you need help, go and get it. There's an underlying issue because most alcoholics do not set out to become an alcoholic. There is always an underlying issue. You can't go down to the job centre when you're sort of 16, 17 and say, oh, yes, sign me up, I want to become an alcoholic. It doesn't work like that. It's something that triggers it, that they can't deal with the problem, that alcohol covers and masks up the actual issue. So
Right.
it's a real tough one with the family, because even now that the book is about to be published, there is such anger in the family that we are fully prepared that it's going to go global, in the fact that we're going to end up in court with liable action. We can see it coming, and we've already got sort of solicitors and everything else, because this book is so controversial. The family are going to gang up on me and the way it's going to go. So it's going to be quite interesting, because that'll give me some good publicity.
Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I've got a book coming out soon that's going to be controversial too. So
Yeah, good stuff.
yeah, and I'll be back in the papers again. What it used to be. So, but I don't care 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, but um, the trouble is, every family try to hide. They're like, if anybody's got a problem with their family, they tend to hide it away, and
Yeah.
that's what your family try to do, isn't it? Because it's like being shamed, isn't it? Put shame on the
Yeah,
family.
it's a real odd one, because even now, the book's been completed and it's just been finished editing. And even now, people go, "Oh, did you know your mother did this? Did you know your mother did that?" And it's like, this has taken 5 years to actually put together, because people have suddenly come out the woodwork and said, "Oh, did you know your mother was this, and your mother did that, and this happened?" And it's really weird, because there's only, out of how many sort of uncles and aunts have I got? I've got about 10, 12. There's only two that stood by me and said, "No, your mother had a problem. We tried to confront your father on it, and your father just shut us down. So what else could we do?" And it's
Mm.
just so bad that the family do this. And I don't understand, because then at the funeral, they were like, "How dare you insult your mother?" They put her on this pedestal, and it's like, but you knew she was an abusive alcoholic. You used to get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning with her ranting down the phone at you, and yet that was acceptable. How can you then suddenly, because she's now dead, put her on this pedestal about life's wonderful, and oh, she was a great woman and she did this, she did that? And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit the narrative as to what the real life situation was. And it just is beyond comprehension as to the family stance. And it's really weird, because literally,
But on the flip
yeah,
side of it, on the flip side of it, because I've got to look at two sides of the story here.
hmm,
You know, people might say he's listening now on the radio. We've got quite a lot of people actually listening, and
yeah, cool,
and people are coming in and saying, well, even though that you were being hurt, you had all this abuse from your mum and everything,
hmm.
you know, why don't you because you're a son, you should be there supporting her and kind of like helping her.
Well, this is another very, very good question, because I think I was about 15, 16, and it came to that point when I needed to have that conversation with my dad. And my mother was at work, and she was a manager of an off license, ironically. So she was at work, my dad was there, and I sat down and said, "Look, Dad, we know she's got a problem. She gets up in the morning, she pretends to have black coffee, and she puts gin and coke together. We know that, you know that. Let's sit down and write out a plan, and get the help she needs." Now, my father did something rather strange and exploded at me and said, "How dare I even suggest that she had a problem?" Knowing full well that they went through, I think the family went through about 4 bottles of gin a week. And on top of that, you had brandy and vodka and other things that came into the house and then disappeared. So there was a problem there. And my father didn't want to face this reality. So he said, "Look, I'll put it to you to prove it. Go off and prove that your mother's an alcoholic if you're that convinced that she's got a problem." So that weekend, they went away somewhere. I can't remember exactly what happened, but me and my girlfriend went, "Right, okay, let's go." So we did some research about where alcoholics store bottles of any sort of fluid they can find. We found them in the laundry basket. We found them in the washing machine. We found them in the freezer. We found them in the toilet system. Always look in the toilet system. That's a good one. Underneath the bath, underneath panels. We had about 20, 25 bottles, half full, empty. Some were full. I put them all in the middle of the table, knowing that the day that I was going to do this, my mother would be at work late. And my father came home and I went, there you go. That's what I found across the house. And he went, right, I'm going to sort it. I said, look, I'm happy to go with any meetings with her. I'll come and support you. I'll do whatever you need to do. And my father said, okay, I'll sort it. Now, I sat on the top of the stairs. My mother came in and I was right. Okay, this is going to explode. I need to be here to find out what's going to happen. My mother walked in. My father called her in the front room and went, what's this? And she went, well, they're in a load of empty bottles. And my father went, look, your son's concerned you've got a drinking problem. What is going on? So she said, well, I like to have a glass of wine with my meal every night. So my father said, well, why are you hiding all these bottles? So she went, well, because you'll moan at me. So he said, well, in future, just openly drink and then obviously it won't be a problem. Can you put the bottles away? And that was the entire conversation. And it's like, what just happened? It's like, and that I did that 2 or 3 times. And the point being is at that point, when you've got nobody that will believe you that she's an alcoholic, I've confronted her, God knows how many times about you got a drinking problem. She refused to accept it. At what point do you actually, At what point do you actually then sort of cut your losses and go, right, two palms up, I'm leaving. And I did, and I left. And I didn't speak to him for 5 years. So
what made you speak to her after 5 years?
That's a whole different story. I was in the pub with my friends and we were drinking, and I'd disappeared off the face of the planet. I wasn't on any register or anything, and I was in Bromley in Kent at the time. And it was a work party, and suddenly I got this tap on the shoulder, turned around, and my cousin was staring me in the face, went, hello, Lee, how are you? And it was like, oh, God, I didn't want to be found. No, not one of the family. And she said, you need to, we sat down and had a chat. She said, you need to actually go back to your parents and confront the issue because it's not doing you any good. It's not doing her any good. And at the time, my girlfriend said, well, okay, they found you now. It sounds like a plan. So I phoned them out of the blue and said, look, I'm coming. I'm going to put the record straight. Let's meet on Sunday. Well, I'll come around for dinner. And I arrived back, and 5 years later, house hadn't changed. There were still mice running around. The house was still in absolute disrepair. It was as though I hadn't left. It was like this time zone, as though something had frozen in time. My mother was sitting there drinking whilst I was having a conversation with her. And it was like, what is going on? So I said to her, look, you got a drinking problem. And I was quite calm and collective and all the rest of it. And we went back to the whole old scenario. No, you're imagining it. And it was like, what point? And then because that sort of, they found me, they then started trying to sort of get back into my life. And they were kept at arm's length up until obviously my father died, and then all hell broke loose. But yeah, that's why I went back. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ever spoken to him again.
Right. Okay. Today, I just want to ask you these questions. Do you have a drinking problem today?
No. I would say I'm semi-teetotal. As I said before, I'll go out with the boys and have one night out every 6 months. But no, alcohol's hardly ever touched. We might have a few glasses of wine at Christmas, but don't touch it. That's not to say I'm against alcohol, of course. A lot of my friends drink regularly. And it's like, yeah, fine, that's your choice. But don't go to the point whereby you're doing it every single night, every single day, every single hour. Then you've got an issue. So.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. What do you say to people? You share your story, and it's really good that you do, because you need to get it out there, and you're going to write a book and everything. And when you write your book, let me know, and I'll get back on. We can talk about the book. But there's one thing that what I want to ask is that when you kind of share your story, what do you expect to get out of it?
The thing that I want to, up until 5 years ago when my mum died, it was always my issue, my problem. But when she died and the family sort of all hell broke loose, I actually went to start sort of dealing with my own sort of personal injury issues, not injuries, issues as to what was going on. So I joined AA, and AA actually put me in contact with their sister company, which is called Al-Anon, and
Yeah,
Al-Anon support all family members. And it's really weird because for me, having a conversation with somebody that's never been through it, it's like talking to a brick wall. They'll ask you questions, but it won't actually sink in. I phoned up Alan and said, "Oh, come along to the meeting." The woman was like, "Yeah, pop along, and we'll make you a cup of tea." I walked in the room, sat down at the table, and there was about 30 people around this table. And she said, "Look, we go through the Alan rules, and we just do a few rules, and then we'll go around and see how everyone is and how is everyone. Yeah, we're fine." And then she said, "Anybody want to talk about today's topic?" And I think it was forgiveness or something. And we went around the room, and suddenly I just turned around and went, "I can't forgive him." And they went, "Oh, why is that?" And I started telling my story. And then suddenly somebody went, "And did she do this?" And somebody else went, "Yeah. And then you'll find this, and then you'll do that. And then you do." And it was like this whole wall had been broken down by these people in this table. They were all on my level, and they totally got everything that I've been saying for 40 odd years in the space of about 5 minutes. And it was like, oh my God. And what actually happened on the back end of this was, how do you raise funds? And they said, well, we're self-funding and we do by contributions and everything else. And I said, right, okay, you've helped me so much. This was about 10 sort of sessions in, that I'm going to write a book. I'm going to raise some funds for you. And I actually want people to know that dealing with an alcoholic, there is light at the end of the tunnel. It isn't all bad, because my life now, what I'm late 40s. Let's just put it like that. My life now is really, really cool, and I'm not going to deny it. That I've got through that point of everything was on my shoulders, and I had a real tough time with it. But now I've got the rest of my life, and life is quite good. Life is sweet. You can walk outside, and I start noticing things like the sun is shining. I've got a grandson that entertains me all the time. And there's so much more to life than being involved in this scenario. So the whole idea of why I tell my story is to give hope to people that are going through it now, and to give them advice, and to give them that glimmer of, yeah, life's not all bad. There are going to be times when it's going to be really tough, and there's are other times when there's going to be sort of that, yeah, life's all right. And that's why I do it. It's not because I want to make money. Yeah, okay, everyone wants to make money,
yeah.
nice, happy life. But at the same time, I want people to actually get through it. I want them to be there to hold their hand, to get them to push on, and to know that it is going to end at some point. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. So, what do you do? What do you do in your spare time? Do you have a business? What do you do?
I am a professional presenter. I do a lot of local radio work. I do a bit of coachings for people. I'm qualified for Louise Hay Heal Your Life stuff. So there's all sort of bits going on in my life right across the board at all times. Plus, also, I try and help people with public speaking, which is quite one of my main drives. So, so I'm a busy boy. So there's lots of little bits going on, as one would say.
Well done, well done. And some, did you ever blame yourself because of your mum's drinking?
Yep, all the time, and that is one thing
Why?
that.
Why?
Well, this is one of the things that sort of growing up in a household, my mother always used to blame me for everything, and my mother was obsessed with having a little girl, and she said if you'd been born a girl, things would have been different. And this was from sort of as far back as I can remember. And when they start indoctrinate you as to everything's your fault, and if you hadn't have been born and if you hadn't done that, you start blaming yourself for, well, perhaps that is the reason why my mother drinks, and that is perhaps the reason why my mother does this. And it's very difficult to actually even now, I still get that mindset occasionally. It's like, why me? And I'm sure everybody gets it at some point, but it seems to hit me in waves. But I deal with it now. It's like, yeah, okay, it's happened, and everything's not going to be 100% all the time, but I can now cope with it. I can now deal with it. And beforehand, it would have been, oh God, what's going to happen next? Oh God, and I'll go down into this pit to try and climb out the other side. And I think that's the problem, is that when you start indoctrinating people into, you are not bad, you are responsible, then it sort of ends up in your psyche, and is, you have to reprogram your psyche to get out of that thinking. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So when does your book come out?
My book, hopefully, is going to be out by the end of the year. It's called Son of an Alcoholic. And we're looking for a publishing house at the moment to actually get it done. The final edit has just been completed and has been sent through as we speak. So there's going to be lots of revelations, should I say. And there is a twist at the end. And I do find out why my mother became an alcoholic. And it's called a chapter called Bombshell. And it literally changes everything in the entire story, which is quite interesting. But I can't tell you, because otherwise you won't buy the book. And it does raise funds for AA. So please go out and buy a copy. And hopefully I'll send Steve a copy, and then Steve can do some sort of promotion for me.
I'll definitely do that for you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
I would definitely do that for you. I would definitely, and I'll see what I can do about getting you on television and stuff. So
perfect.
I've got some contacts, so
excellent.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. I'm going to be back around about 11 o'clock. No, 12 o'clock with some more guests. But in the meantime, thank you, Lee. And
thank you, Steve. We'll speak again.
See you again. Have a good day.
Sure. And you. Take care.
Right.
Thanks.
Yourself.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.